All right, as you're sitting down, grab your Bibles, turn to Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2. If you want to use those Bibles there in the pews, you can find Luke chapter 2 on page 672. 672. Luke chapter 2. Well, Christmas has come and gone. One of my favorite times of the year is over. The presents are put away, or the tree is put away. How many of you got your decorations down already? Yeah. A few of you, some of you are like going to wait until spring, June. Good luck with that. Oh, man. Well, last weekend we celebrated the birth of Jesus, and what a great time it was. Now it's time to watch as he grows up. We get to see him become a boy, turn into a boy, and then finally into a man. And so the story of the birth of Jesus, the shepherds, the wise men, the angels, those stories are just only the beginning of Jesus' life. Just a drop in the bucket, really, of what Jesus is about to teach us. We're going to learn a lot more about this full-grown man, Jesus, in the weeks and then the months to come as we go throughout the book of Luke, so that, as Luke reminded us in chapter 1 and verse 4, that we may know the certainty, remember that? The certainty of the things that we've been taught. That we would know for certain who Jesus is, what he did for us, that we may know for certain who we are in Christ. And so that's what we're going to discover as we go throughout the book of Luke. But today is chapter 2. And in Luke chapter 2, we might find what we call snapshots of Jesus growing up. You know, you have those photo albums at home, and you go through and you see these snapshots. You know, they don't tell the full story of what was going on in that moment, but you can kind of get a glimpse of what's happening. That's what we see in Luke chapter 2 and the rest of Luke chapter 2. We see some of what happened early on in his life, and it really tells us that Jesus was the long-awaited Messiah. And in Luke chapter 2, like all children, Jesus walked this exciting but frustrating and frightening and confusing and at times exhilarating road from childhood into adolescence and then finally into adulthood. But unlike the rest of us, he did it without sin. I think that's pretty amazing, without sin. Well, let's jump into Luke chapter 2, verse 21. We'll look at these snapshots. Verse 21 says this: On the 8th day, when it was time to circumcise him, he was named Jesus, the name the angel had given him before he had been conceived. So here's the first snapshot. Right at the outset we see of Jesus, and that is we see his identification. We see who Jesus is. Write that in your message notes there in your bulletin, identification. We see who Jesus is and what he was created to do. And I love this because not even the Son of God is exempt from being circumcised according to Jewish law. And here it was a reminder of God's original covenant with Abraham, which was renewed through the law of Moses and then practiced for centuries after that. And as the Israelites are growing up in the community, this is what they did with their sons, their sons. And Jesus was not exempt from that. And here's what's interesting. If you were a Jewish male and your parents wanted you to be, and if you wanted to be a part of the community, if you wanted to worship at the temple, if you wanted to study in the synagogues, if you wanted to be a part of everyday community life, if you were a Jewish male, you had to be circumcised. Otherwise, you were unclean. You couldn't be in the community. You couldn't be among the people. And you were considered an outsider. So it made sense for Jesus to be circumcised, so he could come and go throughout the communities and that he could worship, in the temples and be in the synagogues. It made sense from that standpoint. So, but it was also during this circumcision ceremony that the mother and father would name their baby. And like today, a lot of time and effort was given, a lot of thought was given to what the baby's name was going to be. Now, it was easy for Mary and Joseph. They were told what to name the baby. But back then, they spent a great deal of thought in planning babies' names because your name would tell people who you are. It identified you as somebody. in the community, or maybe who your parents were, or whatever it was. And so, of course, we know Jesus' name meant something. We know that God had already chosen Mary's baby's name, Jesus. And Jesus means the Lord saves. Somebody put it one time, God to the rescue. I like that. So Jesus saves. Names are very important, and the names that we give to our children are so important. I know we have a couple of expectant mothers worshiping with us. I won't point them out. You can probably tell who they are. So we have some expectant mothers in the room, and I want to challenge them, and I want to challenge the rest of you who plan to have babies someday. I just challenge you. Put some thought into your baby's names. Consider what you're going to name them, because that name can be such a huge incentive. And kind of a story for me, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, my grandpa, who was a preacher in Kentucky, had sent me a birthday gift. And it was when I opened the present, it was a plaque, just a small little plaque that had my name on it and what it meant. Never knew what my name meant, until I can't remember if I was turning 7 or 8. But anyway, it read this: Jeremy, anointed by God. Now that made me feel pretty special. I didn't know what anointed meant at 7 or 8 years old. I had to look that one up. But that's what it means. And so from an early age, I knew God had something special planned for my life. And as much as I fought him to be in this position where I am today, as much as I fought him on that, he still anointed me. And my name always meant something to me. So I want to challenge you. Your name identifies who you are. It identified who Jesus was and is. Savior of the people. And it'll shape the direction, maybe become an incentive to your children as they grow up. Okay, so let's read on. Verse 22, when the time of their purification according to the law of Moses had been completed, Joseph and Mary took him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every firstborn male is to be consecrated to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice in keeping with what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of doves or 2 young pigeons. All right, so now 40 days has passed since Jesus was born. 40 days. Jesus is 40 days old. Mary and Joseph travel once again to the temple in Jerusalem to fulfill the law. And the law required, if you read the Old Testament, requires that at 40 days, the mom and the son, in this case, the son, would need to go to the temple for purification rites. They were unclean for 40 days, essentially. And so what they would have to do is they would have to go to the temple, and the Old Testament says they would have to sacrifice a lamb. And then it says, but if you can't afford a lamb, then you could sacrifice 2 doves or 2 pigeons. Isn't that interesting? And what do we find? Mary must have had some poverty, because she brings either two doves or 2 young pigeons, as pointed out in verse 24. I think it's interesting that the Savior of the world is born into a family that's not so wealthy, not so prominent, just a peasant family who doesn't have a whole lot, but happy. I think that's cool. So here it is. Here's the second snapshot we see in Jesus' life in these verses, and that is we see consecration. Consecration. And this very act of consecration at 40 days had been carried on for centuries. Back in the Old Testament, in Exodus, we read about the final plague. Remember the 10 plagues that God brought on Egypt? 10 plagues that, Moses said, let my people go, and there were 10 plagues. On the final plague, remember, all the firstborn males of Egypt were slain. The firstborn males in Israel, however, were spared as long as the blood of the Passover lamb was put on the doorposts. Okay, so and here's what it says: the firstborn males then were spared by God, and they thus belonged to Him. And from that day on, there was this law instituted that every firstborn male would be dedicated or consecrated to God. In fact, I think it was 30 shekels that they had to pay in the temple to redeem their sons. as required by the law. And in doing so, they were acknowledging that their child belonged to God. Isn't that interesting? Now, we don't really have that today, do we? We don't offer a sacrifice to redeem our children back. However, we kind of read some stuff in the Bible that it talks about dedicating our children to the Lord. And actually promising that we would raise our children and pledge that we would raise our children to love God and to walk in His ways. And so this year at some point, I've been talking about this. I know you guys, I've talked with you guys quite a bit about it. At some point this year, I would love to have a baby dedication service in which the parents pledge to raise their children, to rear their children in a God-honoring way. It's more for the parents than really for the babies, but a blessing to the babies if you decide to do that. So I kind of want to wait because we do have expectant mothers in the room. I'm going to wait and see if they might want to participate. But I think it would be a great thing to see all these young families and to really challenge them to rear your children in honor of God. Okay, so anyway, consecration. We see that in Jesus. That's a snapshot we see there. Let's read on. This is one of my favorite parts of the story as Jesus is growing older. Okay, so he's still 40 days old. They're going to the temple. Now there's a man in Jerusalem called Simeon who was righteous and devout. He was waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not die before he had seen the Lord's Christ. Moved by the Spirit, he went into the temple courts. When the parents brought in the child Jesus to do for him what the custom of the law required, get this, verse 28, Simeon, this old man, took Jesus in his arms and praised God. Crazy, right? We'll come back to that. And he said this, Sovereign Lord, as you have promised, you now dismiss your servant in peace. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the sight of all people, a light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory to your people Israel. Now, I wonder how Mary and Joseph felt when this elderly gentleman walked up to them and took their baby from their arms, right? I would have been freaking out, I'm sure they were frightened. Maybe they were sitting there thinking, don't forget to support his neck. Hold on to him carefully, don't drop him, But then I wonder what they thought when Simeon said, I have seen your salvation. I would imagine maybe he's looking up to heaven, talking to God, saying this, I have seen your salvation. Were Mary and Joseph relieved maybe that this elderly prophet was now repeating the same words that this angel Gabriel had said to Mary almost a year ago now? Who knows? But I think about that man taking that baby in his arms, and I found this story that Nancy Dahlberg tells about a time when she and her family were visiting San Francisco at Christmas time. They were visiting her husband's parents' house in San Francisco. And she writes this story. Listen to this. Christmas was on a Sunday that year, just like this year, right? Christmas was on a Sunday that year, and in order for us to be back at work on Monday, we had to drive 400 miles from San Francisco to Los Angeles on Christmas Day. When we stopped for lunch in King City, the restaurant was nearly empty. We were the only family, and ours were the only children. I heard Eric, our 1-year-old, squeal with glee. Hi there, hi there. He pounded his fat baby hands, whack, 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 on the table, on the metal tray of the high chair, and his face was alive with excitement, eyes wide, gums bared, in a toothless grin. He wriggled and chirped and giggled, and then I saw the source of his merriment. And my eyes could not take it in all at once. It was a man wearing a tattered rag of a coat, obviously bought eons ago, and dirty, greasy, worn pants. His toes poked out of used-to-be shoes, and his shirt had ring around the collar all over. He had a face like none other, with gums as bare as Eric's. Hi there, baby, the disheveled man said. Hi there, big boy. I see you, Buster. My husband and I exchanged a look that was a cross between, what do we do, and poor devil. Our meal came, and the cacophony continued. Now the old bum was shouting from across the room. Do you know patty cake? Attaboy. Do you know peekaboo? Hey, look, he knows peekaboo. Eric continued to laugh and answer, hi there. And every call was echoed. Nobody thought it was cute. The guy was a drunk and a disturbance. I was embarrassed. My husband Dennis was humiliated. Even our 6-year-old said, "Why is that old man talking so loud?" As Dennis went to pay the check, he whispered for me to get Eric and meet him in the parking lot. "Lord, just let me get out of here before he speaks to me or Eric," I prayed as I bolted for the door. It was soon obvious that both the Lord and Eric had other plans. As I drew closer to the man, I turned my back, trying to sidestep him and any error he might be excelling. As I did, Eric, with his eyes riveted on his new friend, leaned far over my arm and reached out with both hands in a baby's pick-me-up position. And so in a split second of balancing my baby and turning to counter his weight, I came eye to eye with the old man. Eric was lunging for him, arms spread wide. The bum's eyes both asked and implored, "Would you let me hold your baby?" I love your guys' O's. That's so cool. There was no need for me to answer because Eric propelled himself from my arms into the man. Suddenly, a very old man and a very young baby clutched each other in a loving embrace. Eric laid his tiny head upon the man's ragged shoulder. The man's eyes closed, and I saw tears hover beneath his lashes. His aged hands, roughened by grime and pain and hard labor, gently, so gently, cradled my baby's bottom and stroked his back. I stood awestruck. The old man, it's getting good. The old man rocked and cradled Eric in his arms for a moment, and then his eyes opened and set squarely on mine. He said in a firm, commanding voice, "You take care of this baby." Somehow I managed to squeeze the words, "I will," from a throat that seemed to have a stone lodged in it. He pried Eric from his chest, unwillingly, longingly, as though he were in pain. I held my arms open to receive my baby, and again the gentleman addressed me. "God bless you, ma'am. You've given me..." I didn't want to cry through this. He says, "God bless you, ma'am. You've given me my Christmas gift." Yeah. Whew. So she wraps it up. She says, "Oh man, I could only mutter thanks." With Eric back in my arms, I hurried toward the car. Dennis wondered why I was crying and holding Eric so tightly and saying, my God, forgive me." So, here's Simeon, an elderly man, waiting all this time for his Christmas gift. And he had waited a lifetime for this moment. And he finally got to hold the Messiah in his arms and holding a baby that would sometime in the years to come transform all of humanity. Amazing. So write this in your notes. He affirmed for Mary and Joseph that their child would become salvation for all. Verse 33 says the child's parents marveled at these words. How amazing, how amazing. And then look at verses 34 and 35. Simeon blessed them, and he said to Mary, his mother, "This child is destined to call the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be spoken against, so that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed." And you could see him, he's looking at Mary, "And a sword will pierce your own soul too." 33 years before Jesus' brutal death, Simeon tells Mary that her baby is going to break her heart. It's going to be a tough, tough go for her. And, I always think if she knows the prophecies, the Old Testament prophecies, if she knows who she's holding in her arms right now, and then she knows the brutal end that this baby is going to face. But also, the victorious conquest that he's going to win to defeat death and hell, the triumphant victory. Okay? Well, verses 39 through 41, they take us from Jesus at 40 days old. We see this whole life pass before us. He's now 12. Verse 39, when Joseph and Mary had done everything required by the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth. And the child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. And every year, I love this, every year, his parents went to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. It was important to them to raise their son and all their children in the eyes of the Lord. And so we see this snapshot in Jesus' life as maturation. Write that in your notes. We're seeing Jesus mature and grow in the faith and grow in the customs of Jewish custom and religious custom. And his parents are making sure that everything is being done properly. And they go to great lengths to bring Jesus up right. And they're making sure now that they're making the proper preparations for him to become a man. At 12 years old, a son would be mentored by his father because at 13 in Jewish custom, that's when they became a man. So at 12 years old, I'm sure Joseph was busy preparing Jesus to become this man, to mature and to become somebody in society. And so here it is, verse 42. When Jesus was 12 years old, they went up to the feast, according to the custom. After the feast was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking it was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. The fear of every parent, right? Losing your kid. How many of you have lost your kid before and just totally freaked out? Man, here it happens to Mary and Joseph. And back then, families and friends would travel in these caravans. And the guys would be in one group and the women would be in another group. And typically the children would be with the women. So maybe Joseph, obviously he's probably thinking, well, Jesus is probably with the women and everything's fine. And Mary's maybe she's thinking, well, maybe he went up to see Joseph. He's becoming a man now. Maybe he's got some things to talk about. Well, they both think that with the other, and the fact is he's not. And so when they realize that Jesus isn't with the other, could you imagine what went through their minds? Joseph probably thought, man, God is going to be mad at me. He went through all this trouble to send me his son, and I've lost him. You don't want to tick off God, right? But anyway, they must have gone through every emotion of anger and frustration and fear and worry, and they can't find their son, their 12-year-old son. Where in the world is he? And the problem was, in their quest to find him, they look in all the right places where you might find a 12-year-old boy, right? But the problem is they didn't look for where the Son of God would go. That was like their last resort. Verse 46, after 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. Now, some of these, this is what I see in my mind. Jesus is sitting among these teachers in the temple, and he's asking them questions, and he's got this great insight. These teachers, do you know, probably some of these teachers are the same ones that in 20 years, he's going to come back and chastise? I like that. For now, he's just kind of sitting back and listening, But in 20 years, he's really going to give it to them. He's going to challenge them and really make them think and kind of chastise them. All right, so Jesus, for now, is just sitting with them. We know that Jesus wasn't arrogant. He wasn't acting like a know-it-all. And I doubt that Jesus, at this point, was trying to trap them in their thoughts or anything like that with questions or comments. If he did, at 12 years old, they probably would have run him out of the temple. So imagine Jesus, is just sitting there. And there must have been such great insight to his questions and wisdom in his own answers and comments and great humility, I would think, in his demeanor, that they welcomed this dialogue with this spiritually advanced boy, 12-year-old, And what's it say? The teachers are amazed. But look at Mary and Joseph. Look how they react. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." And I doubt it, she said it in a nice voice like I just did. All right? So Jesus says, "Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know that I had to be in my Father's house?" Man. And they didn't understand what he was saying to them. Here they are, the very first words of Jesus recorded in the entire Bible from him to a human being. And look what he's saying. Very first words of Jesus Christ. Look what he's saying. I had to be doing my Father's will. I had to be about his work. I had to be about his business. I had to be in his house. Jesus knew what was important. Why don't we? Why don't we? Anyway, the final verses of Luke chapter 2 kind of give us a model to follow, and this is where I want to kind of tie this ribbon around this package, okay? So verse 51, he went down to Nazareth with them. He was obedient to them, but his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. Isn't this what we all want for our children? To grow up and mature intellectually, physically, spiritually, and intellectually, and socially. You know, we're constantly reminding our children, brush your teeth, do your homework, sit up straight, right? Quit acting like a baby, grow up. It's what we want for our children. And honestly, I wish more parents would spend more time on the spiritual part, the spiritual aspect. We're good at training our kids to be good athletes and football players and basketball players. We're good at helping them to become singers and actors, and I think that's great, and there's nothing wrong with that stuff. But what about the spiritual side? I wish we spent more time on that part. Because I'm telling you, some of the greatest memories that your children are going to have when they grow up are time spent among Christian people. I know I do, you know. I mean, in their adult lives, these are going to be some of their fondest memories. Going to vacation Bible school and church camp and Christmas Eve candlelight service. By the way, if you weren't here Christmas Eve, you missed it. I know some of you had some legitimate excuses, but it was good. I'm not tooting my own horn. I thought it came together pretty well. So anyway, Sunday school, discipleship groups, singing groups, youth groups, sitting in the pew with you every Sunday morning is so important for your children to do because they're going to remember that. It's going to have an impact on their lives. Okay. Deuteronomy chapter 6. I want to read this. It says, love the Lord your God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength. And that verse doesn't stop there. It goes on. He says, these commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. And he says, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road. When you lie down and when you get up, tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. And I want to ask you, do your children know that you love Jesus? If they don't, you're not talking about it. It's not important to you. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. That's what's important. And like Mary and Joseph, we've got to choose to shape our children's lives. We've got to show them what's important. To them, it was important to be at the temple every year for the Passover feast, to be in Jerusalem for the Passover feast. It's our job as parents to show them what's important, to live it out, to help them mature in everything. And then when it's all said and done, we've done our job. You know what? Ultimately, it's up to them. They've got to choose then whether or not to grow and mature in Jesus Christ, just like it's up to us to do the same thing. No one else can make that decision for us, to grow and mature in Jesus Christ, okay? Whether you're 12 or 96, you got to choose to want to grow in your relationship with Jesus. You got to choose that. Is it important to you? Is it? I'll wrap it up with this. Charles Campbell said this. Jesus grew up. The baby in the manger became full grown and changed the world. And the full-grown Jesus, who is alive and ruling this universe at this moment, gestures to us and invites us to grow up, to become who he created us to be, who he calls us to be. Is it important to you? And there's no doubt that our maturing process will, it'll be uneven, it'll be difficult, we'll question things, the journey is going to be tough. There's no doubt about that. But if we travel in the company of the Holy Spirit, then we'll discover the joy of growing up in all the ways into Jesus, the head of the church, the head of the body.